Ja, men välkomna tillbaka till den här frågestunden. Och Georgia står här färdig att ge svar på allt som kan finnas. Så om ni ställer en fråga på svenska så kan jag säga den på engelska. Ännu bättre är om ni ställer den på engelska så slipper jag översätta. Men det är upp till er. Så att välj språk och vi kan börja med vem som helst. Här har vi en fråga. Vi har en fråga här om aminosyror. Jag tar det på svenska då eftersom du tar det på engelska.
Okay, my name is Mats Olofsson and I have a question about amino acids. The fact that it's only the left-hand amino acids who produce protein, the life's building stones. Can we say that is a proof for creationism and seriously evidence against Darwinism? Because if Darwin's theory should be right, there should be 50% left-hand amino acids and 50% right-hand amino acids if his theory should be right. Is that correct?
I can say it in Swedish as well.
Okay.
For the Swedish audience.
Okay.
Frågan gällde alltså det här med aminosyror, att de förekommer i två spegelvända former. Och i livets kemikalier, så att säga, i proteiner, så förekommer de bara i den ena handens former. Och då var frågan om det här är evidens som går att använda mot evolutionsteorin och för en skapelseteori. Inom parentes sagt kommer vi prata mer om det imorgon, men vi hör vad Georgia säger.
So yes, absolutely, because so amino acids have a chirality, and so but life only uses one of those position space, how it is in space basically, and if how would it know to only use those ones, right? I mean, it should be random, whether it's choosing right or left-handed ones. So I think absolutely that's a good evidence against evolution.
Georgia höll med och menade att det faktum att det bara förekommer den ena varianten i levande varelser är ett argument verkligen mot evolution. Det borde inte vara så. Det borde ha varit en mix.
Talk with a colleague once a time. He objected and said it could be magnetism that was the reason behind this, but this I couldn't.
Ja, en kollega till frågeställaren hade påstått att det kunde vara någonting som hade med magnetism att göra, men det är ju inte så.
Yeah, I don't know.
Det finns inget som tyder på det. Vet inte, men det vi återkommer till det imorgon.
Thank you.
Nästa fråga.
So my name is Gabriel, and I wonder. I did a short video once about the origin of the cell and about evolution or creation actually, and the problems with evolution, and on YouTube, and I got someone who emailed me afterwards, and he had lots of questions, and it went into the pseudo genes, and he had some different articles about how species that seem more related according to the evolutionary ideas had genes that looked more similar to each other than the ones more far away, and that there were some of them that coded for, I think it was egg yolk, whereas when you came further away, it didn't code for that anymore. And yeah, I wonder what are your what's the solution to these kind of patterns?
Ja, och på svenska är det ungefär att det är Gabriel som säger det, att en gång i tiden gjorde han en video som handlade om det här med skapelse och evolution. Och då var det en tittare som hörde av sig och menade att det fanns så kallade pseudogener som fanns i olika arter och att de var mer lika varandra i evolutionärt närstående arter än andra. Och det var då en gen som handlade speciellt någonting med gulan i äggcellens gula på något sätt.
So are you talking about the vitellogenin gene? Is that the one that you're talking about? Okay, okay. The vitellogenin, it's the egg yolk.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were talking about.
Yes.
So there has been a lot with that particular gene. So obviously it's active in chickens because they lay eggs, and it's not active in humans because we don't. And they would say that, well, you can look and you can see across all these different species how, you know, the eggling ones have it and the ones that don't, you know, it's there, but it's really mutated and it's really, they would call it a pseudogene, okay? So like I talked about up there, a type of junk DNA. Anytime you see something like that, they're making a lot of assumptions, okay? And I have seen what they call the human vitellogenin gene, and I've seen the sequence, and it's like this big. It's very, very, very small. The vitellogenin gene itself is like tens of thousands of bases long, and I believe the portion that they say is the leftovers in humans is only about 100 or so bases long. I don't buy it. I just cannot accept that you can take 150 bases and claim that that is a remnant of that gene, you know, left over from our evolutionary past. I just don't think there's enough evidence to show that when that gene is so big and you're dealing with such a small portion in humans. I don't know about all the other organisms because I haven't studied it, but I do know the ape ones are very small as well. So I would not believe that it's a leftover.
Det korta svaret är ju då att den här genen som hos äggläggande varelser då är väldigt lång, den har då en motsvarighet eller en motsvarighet som man då tänker sig i alla fall, som då är väldigt, väldigt kort, kanske bara 100-tal kvävebaser lång. Och att det är väldigt, alltså inte mycket till evidens, utan det är liksom det är framförallt själva idén som bär det, inte evidensen som sådan. Så jag är väldigt tveksam till det som någon form av bevis.
And there is an actual paper on that written by a creationist by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins, and it's available on the Answers in Genesis website. He published it we have a peer-reviewed technical journal called Answers Research Journal. He does an entire paper where he looks at that particular question, and it's worth reading.
Det finns en skapelsetroende forskare som heter Jeffrey Tompkins, och han har skrivit en längre artikel om det i en tidskrift som heter då Technical Journal. Answers
Research Journal.
Answers Research. Okej, det var konkurrenten jag nämnde där. Okej. Så om man vill gräva lite grann i det mer.
Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Henrik. You mentioned RNA that doesn't give proteins. Do we know anything about what function that has?
So there are lots of different types of RNAs. So they've started giving them names like snow RNAs, and there's link RNAs, and there's all different categories of them, and they have different roles, different jobs that they do. A lot of them, almost all of them are regulatory. So they're regulating and controlling. A lot of times they'll attach onto the DNA and not let it be transcribed or translated. They're controlling things. They're turning things off and on. And they have a lot of other roles, cellular roles too, that they're taking control of and doing. So for example, even the process to go from DNA to proteins, the ribosomes, which are the protein factories, basically, those are composed of ribosomal RNA and proteins, and so they have a lot of different roles in the cell.
Frågan gällde ju då det här med vad de olika formerna av RNA har för funktion, mer än att översätta till protein. Och då är det ju så att det finns en mängd olika regulatoriska roller som det här RNA spelar. Det reglerar då olika processer i den levande cellen. Till exempel så ingår det i de så kallade ribosomerna som är proteinfabrikerna i cellen. Och där har de en funktion då i att helt enkelt bygga upp det maskineriet då. Men det finns alltså en mängd olika funktioner hos RNA, annat än att bara koda för protein då.
Is there any genetic evidence or proof for that we as humans, rather than having evolved, that we have devolved over the years?
Finns det någon,
so I want to make sure I understand. So
evidence for
devolution rather than evolution.
Devolving rather than evolving.
Okay.
Ja, alltså om det finns evidens för att människan snarare har avvecklats än utvecklats över tid. Om man kan se det i arvsmassan alltså.
I mean, anytime that we have a mutation in our DNA, I usually like to say, I don't even like to say there's no effect, because I think even if it's a little bit, it's still, so we usually say slightly detrimental. It's a little bit detrimental. I will say that I think God has designed our DNA to be very robust. So if you think about it, we've had 6,000 years of mutations, and there's probably at least 100 or more new mutations in every generation. So from you, like, to your child, there's at least 100, and that's probably being conservative. So it's probably more. And so the fact that we can take all those mutations and still be functioning is pretty amazing. But I think things like increased infertility, increased disease, I think a lot of that is just showing the devolution, as you termed it, yes.
Mm. Jo, men det sker ju hela tiden i varje generation. Från generation till generation så uppstår minst 100 nya mutationer. Och med tanke på hur mutationer är till sin karaktär så innebär det en långsam nedbrytning. Så att om mänskligheten har levt i 6000 år, existerat i 6000 år, så är det kanske begripligt att det borde uppstå en mängd sådana här. Det blir ännu värre om mänskligheten skulle varit mycket längre, äldre. Men vi kan alltså förvänta oss, det är inte orimligt att tänka sig att en del av sådana här effekter som att fertiliteten minskar hos män till exempel. Fertility was another thing as well.
Disease.
Och olika typer av sjukdomstillstånd, genetiska sjukdomstillstånd, är just orsaken av mutationer då. Så att där finns en del konkreta exempel.
I have perhaps more a general question about genomics. Do we know enough about genomics to be able to create a kind of model of the proposed evolution? And if so, has such an attempt been made? If not, has a lack of such an attempt, does that say something about the possibility or the lack of the possibility of that? So can we create a mathematical model, so to say, and simulate a situation which could show evolution?
Frågan är om det går att utifrån den kunskap vi har om hur arvsmassan fungerar konstruera en modell som kan testa om evolutionen fungerar eller inte.
So it's always interesting. They have created mathematical models of evolution, but one thing you have to remember too, they're always programming it. So there's an intelligent designer behind the program. So it's not like they're just letting something happen by random chance. They're designing it to go a certain way and do a certain thing. And so I would say from a mathematical standpoint, even if you could show that, you're talking about someone who has designed that program, and evolution is supposed to just happen by random chance. There's no designer. So that's not really showing evolution by that. If you're talking about doing it biologically, they would say it's impossible to do that because it requires too much time. So you'll never be able to do those types of experiments because it just takes too much time.
Varje sån här, det finns ett antal sån här datormodeller för evolution. Men man bör tänka på att alla de här modellerna är konstruerade genom intelligent design. Det vill säga det är programmerare som har gjort det med intelligenta metoder och som liksom definierar vad som är möjligt och inte. Så att någon modell som simulerar evolutionen i bemärkelsen att det inte finns någon tanke eller plan bakom det hela, det kan det inte finnas liksom. Det är ju lite fritt översatt så. Eller har jag missat något väsentligt? Jag tror inte det.
Hi again. I was wondering, so you talked about the example how bacteria has not seen any beneficial mutations, and I mean creating something new. Then I was thinking if you could maybe talk a bit about the COVID-19, like what happened in the different steps of when they went from one version to another and how they became more dangerous in some ways. And yeah.
Om nu bakterier inte har, om man inte kunnat observera hur bakterier liksom får några nya egenskaper via mutationer. Sådär. Hur är det då med virus som covid-virus till exempel? Vad kan man dra för slutsatser av det vi har kunnat se av hur viruset förändras över tid genom mutationer?
So COVID is a virus which is technically not alive. Okay, so bacteria are living, but viruses are not, and they will tend to, depends on the virus, but with the COVID-19 virus, it tends to produce a lot of mutations with each generation, basically. And that's part of its strategy. Now, not that it's thinking, because it's not alive, but it is trying to make changes that will make it do better, basically, in each generation. So sometimes that's a win, sometimes it can do that, but remember, it's all random. So sometimes it doesn't work, and it doesn't do as well. So it seems like certain viruses, too, will have times when they're very virulent, they're very disease-causing, they're really bad, and then they'll come down again. They won't be as bad, and then they'll go up. They can cycle, and it's just just part of how certain viruses just are very much generating mutation in a very random way to try to be able to survive. But they're not, again, this is just how God has designed viruses, and sometimes people want to know, well, what were they doing in the first place? Because they're obviously, we think of them now all being very bad, but I don't think that's true. I think probably the vast majority of viruses are actually doing very good things. It's just hard to study them and hard to figure that out because they only exist in living things, and so it's much harder to do that. But that's actually, I would love to know the answer to that particular question of all the good things that they're doing. Mm-hmm.
Jo, men virus förändras över tid, men det är inte så att man kan direkt se någon jättetydlig riktning på vilket sätt de förändras, utan ibland blir de lite mer virulenta, de blir lite elakare, och ibland blir de lite mildare, och det är liksom en liten vågfunktion det där över tid. Det är också en intressant fråga liksom hur virus roll var i den ursprungliga skapelsen, och även i denna skapelsen så är det så att virus har många funktioner och en viktig roll i ekosystemen då. Så att ja, jag tror det var ungefär det. Något jag missade där. Ja, okej. Ja, sa hon det? Ja, det kanske hon sa. Att de finns i... de är svåra att studera. Ja, sa hon? Ja, det kanske hon sa. Jag missade det. Ja.
I had one follow-up on that also. So I heard, for example, the Spanish disease, I don't know what it's called in English, maybe it's that, how it was very deadly, but then with time it mutated and became less deadly. And why don't such mutations eventually wipe out the viruses or the bacteria like fully?
Because there's so many of them, because you're dealing with lots of them. So even if some may mutate themselves out of existence, I mean, they may do that, but there's so many of them that it's irrelevant. There's still plenty more that are okay. They win by virtue of being a lot of them.
Det gällde spanska sjukan, alltså den här influensan som var i början på 1900-talet och som var väldigt dödlig då. Den liksom kraschade, liksom, det vill säga den försvann mer eller mindre. Men det är svårt att utrota virus helt och hållet eftersom de är så extremt många. Så att många gånger överlever de och bränner ut sig och blir lite mindre farliga över tid. Så de inte gör så stort väsen av sig så småningom.
If I understand the concept mutation correctly, that is something that suddenly appears as a kind of coding mistake from the genome, so it's not actually supposed to happen. When we speak about viruses, we can see that they are sprouting variation. But is that proven to be mutations, or is that programmed by the virus's genome to actually sprout the variations?
So,
I just say it shortly. Frågan är när det gäller då virus som ju onekligen muterar väldigt kraftigt, så är frågan då, är det verkligen slumpmässiga förändringar helt och hållet, eller är det förändringar inom ramen för ett system som viruset har eller organismen har för att generera mångfald?
So if the virus encodes its own polymerase, it's, depending on the type of virus. So if it's going to, like an RNA virus, it's going to have to encode, it's going to probably encode its own ability to replicate itself, in the sense, it still needs the cell, but it has its own polymerase or enzyme to copy itself. They tend to be very error prone. They make mistakes. So I would agree that it probably is designed to be. So the question is, was it that way originally, and God designed it so that these viruses could, in a perfect world, so to speak, maybe be able to adapt and do different things that need it done? I don't know. And in a fallen world, it causes disease when they make these changes and stuff. And so we're just seeing that, you know, I can't answer that question entirely just because I don't know. We're still, I think for bacteria, we do know a lot of their beneficial purposes. Most of them don't cause disease. But viruses, it's much harder to study them, and we have way more viruses in the world than we do bacteria by far. Even bacteria get viral infections. So studying all that and understanding, you know, what is the purpose of that, and how is it something that was designed that way, or is it something that's happened as a result of the fall? I just don't know.
Nej, men det är svårt att veta helt enkelt. Därför att det kan finnas en ursprunglig roll för den här typen av virus som är lite korrupt idag då. Så att det är svårt att svara på det egentligen.
I think maybe I wasn't able to pinpoint my question.
Okay.
What I mean is like you had these examples of dogs where you have two different genes and two parents, and they gave offspring with variation, not mutation, variation. And you have these short, middle, and long-haired dogs. Would it be a possibility that these so-called mutated viruses are not mutated viruses, but just variations produced by the genome because they have not specialized enough yet? Like if we had a bird who can make dozens, thousands, or millions different birds, and then it, according to like Darwin evolution, they would specialize themselves, and they would be goose or duck or something else. And that viruses are in that process to be still able to spring offspring with so many variations that we don't see a pattern, and that is not actually mutating. Or have science been able to study them enough to conclude that this is actually mutating? That was my question.
Kan du säga det kort på svenska också? Seriöst, kan du säga det kort på svenska också? Så slipper jag översätta det. Ja. När nu djur som hundar till exempel kan ha en variation där vissa gener finns hos båda föräldrarna, så att föräldrarna kan få valpar med kort hår, långt hår, mellankort hår, kan samtidigt få svarta, vita, gråa valpar och korthåriga och så vidare. Så är min fråga om man har kunnat belägga att virus faktiskt muterar till olika former av sig själv, eller om det är så att det här bara är variationer, precis som med katter och hundar, att de inte ser identiska ut allihopa.
I think you're after if there's an inbuilt variation mechanism going on there as opposed to just mutations. Right.
Yes, so it could possibly be that. I think it depends on what viruses you're talking about, because like with COVID, we obviously can test this individual over here and see that, you know, the COVID in this individual is different. So the question you're saying is, couldn't that just be like a variation that we have in COVID versus a mutation that's occurred that's caused it to be different in both individuals? I don't know that they've ever really thought about that. I don't really know if they've thought about that before. I think it's just assumed because more than just assumed, because we do know that their polymerases are error prone and they do make mistakes. So we do know that. So I think that's just more the assumption, because the other, I don't know, we would have a way to study, because we can't sequence every single COVID that's out there to even know that. So.
Det lutar nog snarast åt att det faktiskt är mutationer som sker i viruset då, slumpmässiga. Men det är ju en överlevnadsstrategi för viruset. Well, at least the viruses still are viruses even after a lot of time. So
Yes.
that points it as not being some kind of random process. I mean, it's something that keeps them alive, or not alive,
going.
Not alive.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
nej, men det lutar åt att eftersom virus inte har förändrats till något annat än virus under överskådlig tid, så skulle det visa att det inte är några långtgående förändringar i alla fall. Svåra frågor ni har här. Finns det inga? Bakom dig, Samuel.
So, thank you for a very interesting talk. You mentioned in your talk about the creationist orchard model, or the bushes of life model. So my question is, how much progress has been made to find those bushes, to create a creationist taxonomy? And what is your prediction? Will it be found in the future? How much work is going on? Because it seems to be a really challenging and interesting project. We know that, I mean, it's a very plausible model, but what is happening in that field of research, so to speak?
Ola frågar just om den bibliska modellen med Gud skapar de olika kategorierna av levande varelser från början. Det här med artbildning inom dem och så vidare. Det där området är spännande, och liksom, var befinner sig den bibeltroende forskningen på det området?
So I'll be talking about that tomorrow. So we'll be talking about the creation research into the created kinds, and how do we determine what the created kinds are. I'll talk some about the research that we've done in that area, but it does still continue, and there are several different creation scientists that are working on it, especially on a genetic level. So they're wanting to really study, and that's the level I'm personally interested in too, because I would love to know, how, especially when you're talking, let's say, mammals, because obviously a bear, a lion, a human, I mean, our bodies have to do very similar things, and so how much similarity is there in some of those areas? But obviously those three organisms are very different, and they represent different created kinds. So how do we tell that from a DNA perspective, And so that is an active area of research that it's called so it's done by the Creation Research Society. Some of their people are working on it. It's called the E-Kinds Research Project, and so they are working on that.
E-Kinds.
E-Kinds.
Okay. Ja, det finns en organisation som heter Creation Research Society som jobbar en del med det, framförallt ur ett genetiskt perspektiv då, där man intresserar sig för just det här samspelet mellan dels vad som är gemensamt i arvsmassan hos olika, till exempel ryggradsdjur eller däggdjur som människa och lejon och andra. Och vad som också är, dels vad som är gemensamt och dels vad som skiljer åt, och försöka grundforska på det området. Så att jag kommer att prata om den del imorgon.
Sure, whatever he said.
Ja.
I have no idea.
I just found out. I just made some things out. Ja.
Yeah. Since neither humans nor apes can produce vitamin C, evolutionists think that this is a proof of evolution. What can you say about that?
Eftersom varken schimpanser eller människor kan tillverka C-vitamin själva, vilket många andra arter kan, vad kan det säga om evolutionsfrågan?
Okay, so that's talking about the gulo pseudogene, which is another one like the vitellogenin. And so again, I think the question is, is it just because it might look a little bit like the vitamin C gene, the one that allows us to produce vitamin C, is that really its role in human or not? Was it like that was the role and we've lost that ability or not? And Dr. Tompkins, the same one that I had mentioned earlier, has done a paper on that, a research paper. And if I'm remembering correctly, he actually found a function for that gulo pseudogene. In other words, it's not just a broken vitamin C gene, it actually has a function and it's doing something. So it's producing, I believe, some kind of protein still that has function in our bodies. So just because it might look a lot like the vitamin C gene, it appears it actually has a function that's not related to that.
Ja, den här genen som kallas då för gulogenen, den har visat sig då ha en funktion, och det är samma forskare som nämndes tidigare som heter Jeffrey Tompkins, just det, som har skrivit en artikel om detta också. Så att det finns inget som säger att det är ett släktskapsargument. Det finns andra argument som talar i en annan riktning.
Okay. We talked about revelation, but my question is about Big Bang and how that, like, did God create? Like, some people say, yeah, God created Earth through Big Bang, but the Bible doesn't say anything about that. So my question is, what does a scientist like you say about Big Bang, basically? Yeah.
Frågan gäller då Big Bang, hur du som forskare ser på det här med Big Bang utifrån ett kristet perspektiv.
I'm glad you asked an astronomy question I do know the answer to. Okay, so no, because first of all, the Big Bang, what follows after that is a completely different sequence than we see in the Bible. So, for example, it would have the sun forming about 15 billion years ago, and then Earth 4.5 billion years ago. But in the Bible, the Earth is on day 1, and the sun is on day 4. So the sequence of events does not match. So it's not a good... God could not have used the Big Bang to create, because it just what they say follows doesn't match up with the Bible, number one. Number two, there's no evidence for the Big Bang. So that being the other problem is it's just a hypothetical model that they've developed to try to explain how all this came to be.
Nu är jag inte fysiker, säger hon, men däremot så är det liksom från två håll. Dels att ordningen på skapelsen inte harmonierar med den som står i Bibeln. Det är det ena. Alltså att solen eller att jorden skapades enligt Big Bang då för 4,5 miljarder år sedan och universum för kanske 13-14 miljarder år sedan. Medan i Bibeln så var det tvärtom, att jorden skapades först och sedan då andra typer av himlakroppar. Och sen utifrån ett vetenskapligt perspektiv att det är inte så att Big Bang är bevisad. Inom parentes så kan man väl säga det här med James Webb-teleskop visar liksom att det finns stora problem med Big Bang.
Thank you. I have a question about the findings of different fossils about or correlated to the human being, because there are many fossils depicting many fossils looking of human beings looking like deranged monkeys, but like this one, if you can see. How do you explain this? Because when I read the Bible and sort of, okay, do I have to show it to everyone? This basically, this skull. But like when I read the Bible about Adam and Eve, I don't really imagine someone or like Adam looking like this. But How do you like explain this, or like what's the reasoning?
Han visar upp här en liksom ett fossil av vad säger
jag sökte på gammal vänta.
Ja, någon form av
jag vet inte, jag bara tog första bilden
någon form av en kranium här av någon lite ap/människoliknande varelse, och liksom hur vi ställer oss till den frågan.
So there are when we look at the skulls of the past, okay, and you got to remember that evolutionists have a story that they want to tell, and so they are going to make these fossils of supposed ape men line up to work for the model that they think that, okay, we had a common ancestor 6 million years ago, and then it broke off into a human line and into a chimp line, and the chimps, you know, there were chimps today, and we've got humans today as a result of that particular event. And they're going to try to say that some of these skulls, well, just use skulls, okay, that's the biggest thing they find. So they'll say, well, this has features of both, but that's just not true. They're imposing their ideas on that. And skulls are either ape or they're human for two reasons. One, because the Bible says evolution didn't happen. God created animals according to their kind, and then God created mankind. So one can't have evolved into the other. That's the first thing. The second thing is that when we really look at those skulls, they have features that are common with all the other apes, or they have features that are in common with with the humans. So they're either ape or they're human. They're not somewhere in between. There can be variation in humans, absolutely. Neanderthals are full humans. I mean, they just have really big brow ridges and thicker skulls than we have today, but that doesn't make them any less human. It just makes them a variation within the human kind.
Ja, man kan se det från två håll. Dels så är det utifrån det bibliska hållet, så är det helt klart att människan skapades som en speciell art, och apor och människoapor som ingår i den kategorin då är en annan art, så det finns ingen mix däremellan. Sen när man tittar på de här fossilen så är det på samma sätt. Det finns karaktäristika på båda, kännetecken på båda. And then there is an overlap naturally. Det finns alltså liksom en överlappning också. Det finns en stor gorillahanne till exempel, har en hjärnkapacitet som är något större än en pygmé. Men det gör inte pygmén mer aplik och inte gorillan mer människolik för det. Så det finns liksom den typen. Jag skulle rekommendera nummer 1 2020 av Genesis, om du är intresserad av det, som handlar just om människans ursprung. Där finns i detalj ganska väl beskrivet. I was just mentioning one of our issues of Genesis.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Vi hinner med en fråga till. När vi somnar.
How was your trip to Sweden?
A very good trip to Sweden. I've seen the Vasa, the big ship that they pulled up. We have the Ark encounter, but the Ark's bigger than that, but that's still pretty impressive to see that in such great shape. I always say in America, we don't have things that are that old. We don't. We're a fairly new country still overall. So, and we saw we went to, I'll probably not pronounce this right, but Gamlastan today, and we saw the Royal Palace, and it's beautiful. We just don't have things like this in the U.S. It's a very quaint, very neat town.
Ja, vi har varit på Vasamuseet och Gamla stan och tittat på slottet, och vi har inte sådär särskilt gamla grejer hemma i USA. Så att det var vad hon har gjort nu de här dagarna.
I just I had another question that I was thinking about. How do you sort of explain people that are sort of, I don't know if this is quite unrelated to the subject that you've been talking about, but I really wonder about people that are born with the sort of indecisive, I don't know if you can call it indecisive, but sort of indecisive reproductive organs. I've heard of cases with people that sort of have reproductive organs from male and the female, and they sort of have to make a surgery to sort of make the baby one or the other. How does the Bible explain this? Because I don't really know, I haven't read anything or come across anything that sort of tackles this question.
Frågan gäller då när människor föds liksom, och det är liksom, man kanske har både hanliga och honliga könsorgan och liksom, ja, men hur man kan se på det utifrån ett bibliskt perspektiv.
So those are really sad and unfortunate events that happen, and the reason that those things happen is because of the fall. I mean, things are just not perfect anymore, and so sometimes things like that happen. Just like with any disease, you know, there's mutations and there's developmental abnormalities. But I will say, from a genetic perspective, every human being is either one or the other. They're either XX or they're XY, or there's, you know, there are some different ones like XO, XXY, you know, there's some like that, but they're still either male or female. So they, genetically speaking, they're male or female, even if the outside characteristics can be somewhat unsure, but that's just because of those either genetic or developmental abnormalities that have occurred.
Jo, man bör fokusera på regeln snarare än undantagen. Den genetiska regeln är att människor är antingen män eller kvinnor på det genetiska stadiet. Sen kan det då finnas avvikelser, men det är undantag som bekräftar regeln snarare än något annat. Ja, det är just precis. Alltså det handlar ju då om, det är en konsekvens av syndafallet att genetiken kan liksom förändras där då. Could you say that the Y chromosome is what it
is determines male?
Yeah.
If the Y chromosome is present, the individual will be a male. Now, it's always more complex than that, but that would be very rare. And so I'm dealing with what the 99% of the abnormalities result in.
Mm. 99% av de kromosomala avvikelserna, där är det så att det är Y-kromosomer. Har man en Y-kromosom så är det genetiskt sett en man då, inte.
Jag tänkte bara förtydliga, eftersom det är en viktig fråga, bara förtydliga det, så som jag uppfattade att hon sa, att genetiskt så är det ju X och Y eller XX. Men det kan hända saker under embryonalutveklingen till exempel, och på andra sätt, så att liksom det som syns på utsidan inte är så som det är tänkt. Det tyckte hon sa i början. Sen finns det alltid komplexare fall.
Ja, ska vi nöja oss för ikväll då? Jag tycker att vi tackar Georgia med ännu en applåd. Ja. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow. Yes. Welcome back, allihopa.